The Tailpipes and Tacos Cruise-In in Katy returns Saturday morning, November 21st, 8 to 11 a.m. This fun and fabulous event attracts the best rides in town. Tailpipes and Tacos is free and everyone is invited. You'll see collector cars, hot rods, customs, magnificent originals, and resto mods all in one place. The Lupi Tortilla Tex-Mex in Katy. Cars from all over Southeast Texas cruise in and show off in a 3-hour friends and family event. Lupi's will have breakfast tacos, coffee, and the best cars, all at one location. The Lupi Tortilla Mexican Restaurant on the Grand Parkway at Kingsland Boulevard, just south of I-10 in Katy. Drag racer, car enthusiast, and Lupi founder Stan Holt brings you Houston's hottest cruise-in, Tailpipes and Tacos, Saturday, November 21st, 8 to 11 a.m. at Lupi's in Katy. The Wheel Time Car Show will be there, too. Get your ride ready, and we'll see you at the Tailpipes and Tacos Saturday morning cruise-in, November 21st, 8 to 11 a.m. Is your business or company looking to stand out in a crowded advertising market? Looking to reach the real auto enthusiast? Well, you found it. You're listening or watching In Wheel Time, and so are your fellow enthusiasts. The In Wheel Time Car Show now reaches 500,000, and we can put together a marketing plan that will engage them in your product, business, or service. To get the tires rolling, just shoot us an email to our marketing director, Jeff Zekin. His address is jeff@nwheeltime.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the In Wheel Time Car Show, your weekly award-winning go-to all things automotive place. Along with Mike Out of This World Mars, King Konrad DeLong, and Jeff Zekin, I'm Don Armstrong, coming to you from Studio A in Houston, Texas. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We've got our next guest all lined up and ready to go. We don't have any video, but we do have audio, from what I understand. And his name is Mr. Scott Hall, and he's the Senior Vice President of Operations at SwapALease.com. Scott, you there?
I am, and I do apologize for the lack of video. I'm traveling today, so just in a spot where I'm frankly lucky to have audio right now.
Well, you know what? We're lucky to have you. That's all I can say. And all of our viewers and people that follow us are going to have to look at us instead of you this morning. And I know they'd much rather look at you because you're a much younger guy than any of us old-timers. But we really appreciate you joining us. And I wanted to talk to you today about basically the state of the industry, and more specifically, used cars. I know that you're in touch with all of that. And how is the state of the auto industry as a whole? Let's start there, because I know that the manufacturers shut down plants right after the COVID thing happened. It was really a sad time for almost every manufacturer. They didn't have people screwing together cars. And so now there's the trickle-down effect where dealerships don't have the inventory to sell. People turn to the used car market to find something, and inventory went down in the used car market. Prices went up. It was one thing after another. What is your take on today's state of the industry?
Well, I think you really outlined everything really well there in terms of what's happened in the car business so far in 2020. And of course, we're coming off several years of really, really good vehicle sales as well. So I think it's even a little bit more alarming when you drop so quickly, both with the COVID problems and COVID issues, as well as a lot of political uncertainty. However, I do think things are starting to look up again as production increases and starts to catch back up on the new car side. And of course, as you already noted, that really filters down to the used car side of the equation pretty quickly. And that will help consumers out by pushing used car values down as we move through the fourth quarter of 2020 and move into the first quarter of 2021. So it's going to become up.
Yes, I was just going to say, and when you say push used car prices down, actually, I think it's more along the lines of bringing used car prices in line to what they really are valued at today, as opposed to the inflated level of, say, a month or two ago.
You know what? I really think that's a fair way to put it as well. One of the best illustrations of this, frankly, is what we do at SwapALease. Is we're an online marketplace for helping people get in and out of automotive leases midstream. And we do that through a transfer process. It's all, kind of signed, sealed, and delivered by the leasing company. But and the reason a lease transfer typically is the best option for a consumer is it's the most cost-effective option. And to throw a little bit more color on that, it's always possible to get out of a lease at any point in time. Just typically consumers will find themselves in a pretty serious negative equity position. And something that we've seen recently to back up what you're saying, that prices have been inflated, we're seeing people able to buy out of their leases much earlier in the lease term than what we're accustomed to. Usually in the last 4 to 6 months, people that are reasonably close to an equity position, they may owe a little bit, but usually somewhere within reason. We're seeing equity positions presently in the 12 to 18 month remaining range, and that's something I've never seen before. I've been in the business now 20 plus years in leasing alone, and a little bit longer my complete automotive career. So it's something we've never seen. So absolutely in agreement. Inflated is probably a good term, but we are seeing the tide start to turn and move the other direction to help out consumers.
And the manufacturers kind of caused their own issues, not only just because COVID had stopped production, but the manufacturers also put on some huge incentives during COVID to keep their sales running. So with all of that happening is where the depletion of inventory happened, which is good for that customer in a lease that's looking to get out, because the values are higher now that inventories are coming back up in the dealerships lots. You're going to see a lot of transfer of vehicles. People are going to be getting into something new again, and that's going to feed the used car market again with more vehicles.
I absolutely agree with that. No doubt about it. As new car production ramps back up, we're definitely seeing. Starting to see the beginning of the used car prices coming down as an offshoot of that. And one of the other interesting things that we've seen so far in 2020, we're coming off again several really good years of vehicle sales, and we're also seeing a lot of really high lease penetration. And just to be clear, lease penetration is the percentage of vehicles that are leased out of the annual vehicle sales in the United States. And it's been hovering right around 30% over the last several years.
Wow.
And so far in 2020, that number's dipped a little bit to 25%, but we're starting to see some more signs of life and seeing that.
But even at 25 or 30%, that I'm kind of surprised by that. I totally understand where you're coming from, but I did not know it was that high, 25 to 30%. So clearly, leasing a car is very popular.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really interesting when you dig down even a little bit deeper than that, is there's always been a lot of leasing going on in some of the more luxury makes, your BMWs, your Mercedes, your Cadillacs, things like that. But really where you've seen the growth over the last several years is the more everyman vehicles, your Mazdas, your Fords, your Chevys, and things such as that. So it really has been quite a change. And we envision, in fact, and of course, I guess I'm a biased source being at SwapALease for that matter, but as vehicles get more and more expensive, lease payments can be made to be very attractive for consumers. And we believe there'll even be some additional growth in leasing in terms of lease penetration moving forward, moving north of that 30% rate.
And do you find that penetration rate regionally changes, where California and New York is going to be a much higher lease rate versus Houston or Texas, which is going to be lower, sometimes because of the state laws regarding leasing?
You're making a great point. Leasing definitely does have some hot spots within the United States. The greater New York City area, for one, would be kind of the A market for leasing, if you will. California area. Southern California, or pardon me, it's not Southern California, but Southern Florida is another large leasing area. Another one a lot of people overlook is Greater Detroit, because of all the manufacturers and automotive financing going on up there. There's a lot of employees that lease vehicles. So now that doesn't mean there isn't leasing going on elsewhere, but there's definitely packets of leasing throughout the United States, especially in those areas I just noted.
Scott, what is the average lease price? Do you have that kind of figure? I mean, is it a $35,000 car, a $50,000 car? What's the average car that's being leased these days?
You know what? I don't have that number specifically. Let me give you an educated guess on that.
All right.
Right now, the average vehicle price on a new vehicle is right around $35,000. Kind of teeters up and down from that is the last number that I saw. And leasing, again, kind of tips towards the more expensive vehicles in general. Doesn't mean that cheaper vehicles can't be leased. So I would take an educated guess that it would be somewhere into the $45,000 to $50,000 MSRP range would be where you'd see the average lease price if you looked at the market as a whole from top to bottom.
And what is the average length of a lease? Is it 3 years?
It's right around 3 years. You do see, a lot of 39-month leases out there, and that's a way to just kind of bring the payment down a little bit more for consumers by increasing the denominator on the lease term. But 36 months is very much the standard, and right around that 3-year period. And in general, it works really well for leasing too, because most cars anymore are covered for at least a 3-year warranty period. Some of the luxury vehicles even longer. So people like that from a leasing standpoint, that they're not going to be stuck out there with a vehicle that they're not going to own, that they may have to put a bunch of work into. And that's one of the nice things. It kind of mates up with leasing and on new vehicles and the warranty periods.
Do you find most leases are like a personal lease, or how much of the lease is more of a business lease?
There's definitely a significant amount of business leasing going on, but the consumer leasing is still the mainstay.
Okay.
It's also somewhat hard to track because there's a lot of people that do get car allowances, and it may appear as a consumer lease on the front end, but even though it may be being paid by a company ultimately.
Okay. And so what about mileage? I know that a lot of people will actually go with the regular lease at 36,000 miles for 3 years, but do you find that most people buy extra miles up front?
That's a really good question presently. You really kind of see three different mileage types when it comes to a lease or deviations. You see a lot of low mileage leasing out there that's been advertised, and that's typically based on 10,000 miles a year. What you've noted at 36,000 miles would be your standard 12,000, and then anything above a 12,000 typically would be 15,000 miles on an annual basis, even though you could write a lease for more. You do see those are kind of your three mainstays. The 12,000 has been it's kind of been the main one for years and years at this point. I always recommend that if people do need more mileage, they go ahead and do it up front and try to, instead of paying for it after the fact, because it becomes more expensive. But the most interesting thing right now is more and more people work from home, and they're kind of, things are kind of in chaos. We're seeing people use a lot less miles, and I believe that a lot of people will continue working from home even as we move away from COVID. So if I were making a bet on this, I think we'll actually see the average amount of lease miles go down as we move forward over the next couple of years.
And what is your thoughts about what we can expect, say, for the actually 2021? Let's just use 2021.
Let's get short term,
Go ahead with us with this for 2021. Do you see the car sales to hold steady now that it's back up to almost to pre-COVID levels? Of course, it won't reach that total sales number for the end of the year because we've been wiped out for 5-6 months with numbers. But what do you think is going to happen next year? What do you envision for the car industry and leasing and that sort of thing?
Well, one, I want to be an optimist. Assuming there's no significant downturn on the COVID front, I think that 2021 is going to be a very good year for business in general, especially for the car business as they catch up and supplies come back and meet normal levels. I think there's going to be plenty of demand for vehicles as we move into 21. I think we'll see lease penetration rates return to at least that 30% rate, and possibly even move up a little bit in 2021 as more consumers need cars. So I think it's going to be I'm very bullish on 2021 from a car industry perspective.
And what about the electric vehicle surge that's about to take place that, most people hear rumblings of it, but they don't understand the extent of which manufacturers are moving and how quickly they're moving toward an electric vehicle shift. And what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that people are going to start leasing electric vehicles, or do you think it's going to stay traditionally into gasoline propulsion?
Well, I still think that number one, I'm a proponent of electric vehicles, and I think electric vehicles in many cases meet about 90 to 95% of your typical consumer's needs. Obviously, if you're somebody that does a lot of long distance traveling, maybe it's not best for you, but for your average commuter and family man, I think an electric car makes a lot of sense. They can be a little bit more expensive up front, but of course, the advantage there is the gains you make on the back end in terms of no fuel and less maintenance. But believe it or not, electric cars have been good lease candidates now for years. One of the reasons behind that is there's been some questioning of the technology, and the consumer's logic has been, hey, I think I'm going to lease this thing just in case when the new and better one comes out, I want to get that as opposed to hold on to this older technology. So leasing really mates up well with electric cars because, people are going to, it's almost like a very good analogy for that is, people want to have the latest and greatest iPhone every couple of years. It's kind of almost the same thing with electric cars, and that's why leasing is a good way to match that demand with consumers.
And is Tesla a pretty highly leased vehicle?
I don't know the exact lease penetration on Tesla, but we do see a very high amount of leasing done on Teslas, and we see a lot of Tesla activity on the SwapALease marketplace.
And their residual value holds pretty well, which is the
residual.
Yeah, the expected future value of the vehicle at the time of lease. Yeah, how does that play out?
We've generally seen residual values be very strong on Teslas specifically. I think one of the things that helps out with the Teslas is that they're still trying to catch up with demand as well, as great as their demand is. And also, let's not overlook that they're able to do a lot of updates and what have you from a software standpoint moving forward. So even if you do get a couple-year-old Tesla, in many cases, it's very easy to bring that up to the current standards through an online update.
Which is real important because, like, over where I live, I'm 150 miles away from the closest Tesla place at all. And, we've got 2 over there now. But again, they can get a lot of stuff done there without having to come to a dealership or whatever you call the Tesla facility. It's not.
Yeah, because basically they do the upgrades over the internet on your car.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where are you traveling to?
I'm actually SwapALease is based in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's my home base. And heading over to Indianapolis this morning, I've got a young one who plays lacrosse, and we got a lacrosse tournament. Thankfully, it's not normal November weather today. It's actually pretty nice out.
Oh, how cool is that? Lacrosse is a fun sport. You get to throw a ball and whack somebody with a stick.
That sums up my kid pretty well.
Scott, it's great to talk to you, and thanks so much for joining us today. Good luck in the lacrosse game, and enjoy your family because it doesn't last long. The kids will be gone before you know it, as you know, and we really appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, gentlemen. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Me too. Thank you. Okay, that's Scott Hall. He is the vice president of SwapALease.
Nick Phillips, he used to be the president of the Texas Auto Writers, but he was real big into the EVs. When you were talking about that, I thought of him. He leased them specifically for that reason. For one thing, he didn't want to have to deal. I mean, he got some of the first ones that came out. Didn't want to deal with the batteries. The technology was changing. He got into the Cadillac when Cadillac had a really pretty car that was an EV. It just didn't sell. It was overpriced. Anyway, he went through that, but that was his logic, was that he could keep up with the technology and the expense and the maintenance. That's right, and not get stuck with it until things really get developed out there in the market.
And they're pretty close to it right now.
It's getting much better.
A lot of people are releasing EVs and doing a pretty good job, and they're not a problem-prone powertrain, let's say.
He never had any problem with the vehicles that he had while he had them.
Fast.
But again, he turned them over. But I mean, he liked driving vehicles anyway, so that just worked out well for him.
Hey, I'd like to remind you that you can always get a hold of us through Facebook, our website. You can email us, info@inwheeltime.com. And we appreciate you joining us today here on the In Wheel Time radio program. Time now for Konrad's Car Clinic. And I know that you mentioned to us about an hour and 15 minutes ago what you were going to talk about. But guess what? I forgot what it was.
Well, muscle cars can, to a large degree, trace their roots back to Charles Kettering, who was an American inventor and engineer and businessman, and he holds 186 patents. He was the founder of Delco Remy, AC Delco.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the 20s, and he was the head of research from General Motors from 20 to 1947. In 1918, Kettering designed something called the Bug. It was a 300-pound missile with a little propeller on the front of it that was a torpedo. one of the first guided missiles ever out. And it was barely used during World War One.
Is that it?
I thought that was a little airplane. I was wondering why you had this airplane.
That's a torpedo. You can see it's kind of sitting on a tray, and it fly out, and they just release it and. Using it as a weapon of war, but that was, in his head. So kind of one of the first guided missiles had like a 40 horsepower engine on it. But one of the first shots of the arms race in horsepower that led to the hot rods of the 50s was eventually established muscle car as the image of the American automobile, was fired by Charles Kettering. He had been working on high compression engines since World War I, believing that raising the engine's compression ratio allowed the engine to extract more energy from the fuel. Most engines back in the in the 40s and 50s were not much more than like 7-to-1 compression, and Kettering was working around a 12-to-1 compression ratio. But the problem with it was the gasoline back then didn't have enough octane to work in those high compression designs.
That's why all the girls called him Hot Rod. Rod Kettering.
So in the late 20s, Kettering developed tetraethyl lead as an octane boosting fuel additive. And when they added the tetraethyl to the fuel, the octane rose enough where he could run those high compression engines in it. And there's problems with lead in the fuel, and that's all a thing of the past, and they've come up with new chemistry now. But Kettering had developed this overhead valve V8 back in the 40s, but as the overhead valve V8, nobody had jumped on it until finally Oldsmobile raised their hand and said it was originally called the Kettering V8, but they couldn't market it as the Kettering V8. So in 1948, Oldsmobile raised their hand. In 1948, Oldsmobile raised their hand, introducing the 303 cubic inch rocket V8 that kind of dominated NASCAR for quite a while as well. So that's where the overhead valve V8 came from Kettering. But, pretty genius man to be able to do all of those things over time. He had lots and lots of pretty wonderful patents that were assigned to him. Again,
Hot Rod Kettering.
Hot Rod Kettering.
Well, that's an interesting story.
Yep, I thought so.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
With my typical Oldsmobile connection.
Yeah, we noticed that.
Wow.
But that's okay. I didn't realize that he was Mr. Hot Rod. By the way, my grandmother on my dad's side, her name was Ethel.
Oh, I have an aunt named Ethel.
And Jeff had an aunt named Ethel. And
Mike's got somebody named Tetra.
That would make sense. Yes. Tetra. Or is it Tetris?
Tetris, yeah, that's where you stack the blocks on a video game.
She didn't fit anywhere.
She didn't fit anywhere. Thank you, Jeff.
Boom. Thank you.
We need the rim shot. You got to get some sound effects.
I know.
And then leave it over here so I can touch it.
No, don't put it.
He's not touching the Stream Deck. Time now for some of the stories making automotive news headlines this week. Ford Motor Company said yesterday it expects to sell 100,000 cars and trucks equipped with the company's new hands-free driving system in the first full year of availability. The catch is only the system hardware will be installed. The software will not be ready for nearly another year, according to Ford.
So it's a soft hands-free driving.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't let go of the steering wheel. It's really not there, but it is there.
The automaker's Active Drive Assist will be offered first on the redesigned F-150.
ADA, wonderful name for
a
system.
The new Mustang Mach-E electric crossover, both of which will go on sale later this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how much later?
I think 21. I don't think
it says his later this year.
Yeah, well.
But the feature will not be activated until the third quarter of next year. So they're going to start.
If you buy one early that has the system in it, they can activate it later.
Yeah, that's apparently.
Hold on tight.
Because the activation, apparently, you're still working on that software a little bit. If I were going to buy an active system like that, I think I would hold off on the first issuance of the software. Active Drive Assist, or ADA, as Konrad put it, will be standard on selected high-end models and available as an option on others priced from around $1,500.
Yikes.
Well, that's not bad. $1,500 for, but
soon to be recalled.
Soon to be recalled after crashes and, people die because they left their hands off the steering wheel. Well, I told you my experience with that.
Reading a book or...
No, it wasn't that. The problem was that the car didn't know what to do when there was construction or some variation
of the lines in the road, which is what it uses
Correct.
For the active driving.
So it went from lines in the road to buttons. Okay, the yellow buttons that they glue down on the road.
Oh, I love that. That's a setup for automotive history, but thank you. We're going to talk about that in automotive history.
But I had one that was like that. That it would kind of bounce in between the lines a little bit.
Squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I'm driving down the Gulf Freeway with a hands-free system. Cadillac had it.
Mm-hmm. The CT6.
And a very nice car.
Beautiful car.
And when everything worked great, it worked great in the hands-free thing. But when the freeway lines went to buttons to go around a construction zone,
everything that worked great didn't.
The car continued straight ahead like it was going into the construction zone because it didn't understand the buttons. All it knew were the lines. It was looking for lines.
And Don was smart enough to grab the steering wheel and drive the car, which is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and hit the brake.
Yeah, but if you're taking a nap, that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah, well, take a nap, and they don't suggest that you take a nap. The technology isn't quite there yet. But again, it's the infrastructure.
Right.
That's
the problem.
George Skelton says, should a person with ADA drive a car with ADA?
Yeah.
Thanks, George. You're always great for a couple of wonderful comments.
We love George. By the way, the death of Sean Connery triggered a actual wonderful post from George.
Yep.
On Sean Connery and George's dad.
And the relationship they had.
Yes, and it was a wonderful story, and then I reposted it on my Facebook, and it's gotten lots of compliments.
And we have it on In Wheel Time's Facebook as well.
Yeah. Mainly because of the car and the car thing that...
the relationship that with Sean Connery and cars and Sean Connery and George's dad and the theater downtown.
Metropolitan Theater. Yeah. Great stuff.
Is that still there, the Metropolitan Theater?
Unfortunately, no. Well, there was one down there that they were using for an event venue, and I don't know. George would be able to tell us, and I know that he will. Yes, exactly. So it's time now to take a little break, and we will be back with more of the In Wheel Time Car Show right after this.
Texas Truck Works is your go-to truck customizer. From mild-to-wild lift kits, custom wheels, and steering and handling enhancements to the best personal and commercial wraps, Texas Truck Works delivers. Let Texas Truck Works founder Scott Stevens help you get the most out of your truck or Jeep. Texas Truck Works has decades of customizing experience, including power adders and complete engine swaps. Let the Texas Truck Works team design an upgrade plan that fits your budget. Get truck attitude today at TexasTruckWorks.com.